Good evening. I'm Eugene Chan with Straight Talk. Our guest tonight is Mr. Winfried Briskus, the Chief Executive Officer of the Hong Kong Jockey Club. He is a world leader in horse racing, being the chairman of the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities and the Asian Racing Federation. He has had a lifelong passion for horse racing and over 30 years of experience in this industry. Tonight, he's here to tell us why horse racing is vital to Hong Kong's prosperity and stability. Welcome, Winfried.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me on the show.
Winfried, you know, the Hong Kong Jockey Club is very much like a part of life of the Hong Kong people that really needs not much introduction. For my own interest, I actually look up Wikipedia, and this is what it says. It is a non-profit organization providing horse racing, sporting, and betting entertainment in Hong Kong. Is this an accurate statement, Winfried?
It's an accurate statement, but not complete, because I think if one looks at our integrated business model, you're absolutely right. We are not for profit, but it is, in a way, the components of horse racing and sports entertainment. Because if you look at Wednesday nights, if you look at Sundays, where we have, under normal circumstances, 20, 60, 70,000 people, we are responsible wagering with our components, especially football. Wagering has become very prominent, but the root is still, in a way, horse racing, and we have the Mark VI. We are one of the largest membership clubs in the world, with 25,000 active members. And last not least, in the integrated model, it is our charity side, where we have donations of approximately 4.5 billion, which makes us in the top 10 charity donors.
Right.
And our purpose is for the betterment of Hong Kong.
Right. Winfried, it's interesting when you're saying not for profit, because when you look at the term racing and betting entertainment, they're usually not for profit activities. As you say, you have an integrated business model. How unique is this in the world?
It's absolutely unique. I think it's probably, I would call it a social enterprise, which was created with a vision in a way to make contributions. And what we do, especially in the wagering side, we channel a wagering demand responsibly for community benefits.
Right.
And it's nowhere else in the world where you have such an integrated model, and you have nowhere in the world where an organization can create so much value to the community than in such an integrated form.
Right. Just now you mentioned the purpose of Hong Kong Jockey Club is for betterment of the society, and the core value is to serve the community. You mentioned that you're one of the biggest donors, and I think you might be one of the biggest taxpayer for the Hong Kong government, one of the largest organizations that employ people. So what else do you contribute to the society, just for the viewers' collective recollection?
If you look at the tax contribution, I think I would like to put it into perspective of what it makes practically as contribution to the Hong Kong community. Because with our tax contribution of approximately 25 billion, which is 6% of the tax income, we keep the tax rate in Hong Kong low, which is a competitive advantage. And if you see, in a way, our charity donations, we are very strategic how we think we can serve the people of Hong Kong and how we allocate the money. And I think it is important, especially in situation of needs, in situation of crisis, that we can act fast and that we can be agile and help the community, especially during COVID.
Right. When you talk about contribution, the thing that comes to my mind, a lot of the building infrastructures we have in Hong Kong. I mean, even the Hong Kong government stadium where I used to go watch football, I think the Jockey Club has a big part to play. What are the physical structures that you think are of very memorable value to the Jockey Club that you have donated?
I think this goes back to our journey in our contributions. What a lot of people don't know, that we did the reclamation for Victoria Park.
Right.
That, in a way, the Hong Kong clinics, Hong Kong Jockey Club clinics, were, in a way, built by the club. If you look at the Hong Kong UST, which were funded and built by the Jockey Club. If you look lately, in a way, the revitalization of the central police station of Tai Kwun.
Tai Kwun, yeah.
And last not least, if you see the donations we made to the Palace Museum, which will open now on the 2nd of July, we think that are landmarks which people, I think, will have benefits for the people and will create really benefits for Hong Kong as a brand.
So Winfried, I mean, notwithstanding all these significant contributions that you just mentioned, one of your objectives is actually to counteract all this illegal betting. and your revenue basically is from gambling and betting entertainment. So how do you strike the balance between responsible wagering versus, I mean, promoting gambling or even compulsive gambling, which can be a problem in the society? How do you do that?
I think one has to be very mindful that gaming activities can create social problems. But if you see, for example, football betting, football wagering, in 2000, during the World Cup, there was no football wagering in Hong Kong, and there was a huge illegal market. And this illegal market funnels from money laundering, from drug, from crime. So when it came then to the legislation of football wagering in 2003, we have a very responsible way how many matches we offer, what kind of bet types we offer. We look at, do we see any pattern in our 2 million accounts that people wager above their means? So it is, in a way, a very holistic approach we have. And in a way, we don't promote gambling. We don't, in a way, go out and say, please gamble, do this. It is a demand which is in the community, we channel, and which creates tax revenues, and in the end creates community contributions via employment and via charity donations.
I mean, when you talk about all this huge amount of, revenue coming in, how has the trend been in the last few years? Has it been increasing, about, say, the same, or reducing?
If you see, in a way, if you go back to 25 years ago, 1996, 1997, we had practically only horse racing plus Mark VI. This was around 100 billion. We are now with the football side, we look at this year probably around 285 billion. So that's a 2% increase in relation to last year. And we see, in a way, with definitely with the income of Hong Kong people, with, in a way, the development of Hong Kong, that we have grown.
Do you see it increasing?
I think we see a very gradual increase. Right. I think, in a way, our development is very much linked to the GDP. We don't outperform GDP, because in the end it's disposable income. But we could see an increase of our wagering turnover during the time where Macau, which a lot of people don't realize, Hong Kong people lose as much money in Macau than they lose on responsible gambling in Hong Kong.
Right. And so do you see, when you say the increase, is it because more people are getting into the game, or is it because people are betting more, or per bet is higher? Which is the answer?
I think you have different customer segments. You have an 80-20 rule. 20% of people contribute 80% of the turnover. And there are people who are pretty wealthy and have a significant spendable income. If you look at the average bet over years, it has not grown much.
Right. Right. And how about the actual demographics? Is it more young people getting into the game, or you see basically it goes up with the age of the population?
We are very, very careful not to go into underage gambling. And if you see that we measure especially our customers who are 25 plus. And with the demographics, we can definitely see, especially in horse racing, with more people mature, you see an increase in wagering behavior and pattern, while young people have only a very small income, percentage of our income in the club.
Winfried, you've been a club for the CEO for 15 years. You're executive director of racing. You are now, very influential in all the organizations, the International Federation of Horse Racing Authorities. So can you say Hong Kong, the racing world, are we in the map of the world map? How strong are we?
We are now a world leader. If you see, and that is probably one of the interesting parts, if you look at 1996, 1997, from a colonial Hong Kong Royal Jockey Club, we have emerged to the Hong Kong Jockey Club as being a world leader. We had in 1998, we had no horse who was in the top international ratings. We had no race who was one of the major races in the world. Now we are practically in the top 5. We have one of the biggest international racing carnival. We have 0.7% of the world's horse population, but we have 8% of the best horses are trained in Hong Kong. If you look at all leading positions globally in the racing organizations are dominated by Hong Kong Jockey Club employees And that shows that we have best practices and seen as a global leader.
Right. Winfried, before we go to the break, let me ask you about the 25th anniversary. Yeah. Hong Kong is right at the juncture of having returned to motherland for 24 years, working to 25 years. What have you planned for Hong Kong?
First of all, I think we want to celebrate with the community, and that's why we have partnered with the government. I donated 630 million for a campaign and activities really that we have fun for all, that we celebrate with the whole community. Besides this, we definitely have special activities, like we have a special race meeting, we have a special Mark 6 draw, we have special jackpots. But it's, in the end, in a way, it's something we want to celebrate, and I think people will have fun.
All right, let's take a break and don't go away. Welcome back. With us tonight is Mr. Winfried Engelbrecht from the Hong Kong Jockey Club. He has been sharing with us about how the club's unique operating model has enabled it to contribute significantly to Hong Kong's economy and society. So Winfried, we talk about the core value of the Jockey Club, which is for the betterment of society. We talk about in the past what the contribution there has been done. Let's move on to some COVID-related matters, which influenced Hong Kong a lot in the past. And I just realized that actually we hadn't lost one race in the last 2 years during the pandemic. It calls to remind Mr. Deng Xiaoping words about the race will go on and dancing will continue. So in Hong Kong, everything stopped, even schools and work, everything stopped, right? So why do you keep the racing going on at this time?
I think it was probably one of the biggest challenges we had ever in the history of the club. But starting from a must, we have horse welfare. We have 1,200 horses under our care, and one has to take care of them. And if you look to do so, you need around 600 people. When you then see, if you want to run race meetings, how many more people you need? Probably around 400. So we came up with a holistic strategy. First of all, guiding principles. None of our activities can create a public health risk. Secondly, none of our activities can create a risk, health risk to our employees, to our customers, and our license people. From this, we identified very early, we have to develop a holistic testing strategy. So we went in a way in the height of the pandemic. We tested 1,500 people with PCR every day. So we could early identify any risk, any potential positives. We could isolate them before these people who were infected could become infectious.
Were there any unexpectations at all, surprises?
I think the surprises is that you learn that you have to be even more vigilant and that you even have to extend it to the families, because one of the biggest risk factors came from the families. So with this testing regime, we could ensure that we lived up to our guiding principles. Mm-hmm. We could ensure that racing continues. And it's, I think, a sign of the resilience of Hong Kong. And it was admired around the world. And a lot of protocols we developed, we shared with our colleagues in the Asian Racing Federation, in the International Horse Racing Federation, where they adopted them and were able then to resume racing. But for us, I think it was important as the number one entertainment in Hong Kong to have every Wednesday race meeting and the Sunday without creating a public health risk. And people were looking forward to it. I got around probably every week 200, 300 emails, WhatsApp from taxi drivers, all walks of life, who said, please continue racing. That's the only thing which I look forward to doing. It's challenging time.
Right. Winfried, you know, in the last few shows, we often talk about Hong Kong have very stringent, quarantine requirements, and that is not very friendly to businesses, and a lot of expatriates are being said, they have reported that they're leaving Hong Kong. Any of your colleagues or jockeys left because of the current restrictions? Just a matter of interest?
I think it is a massive challenge. I think we were able to hold the international races in a special racing bubble, the same model which were used for the Beijing Olympics. And with this, we could call the international travel. But we face the challenge, especially when we have now our colleagues who have families overseas. So we have around 15-20% of our colleagues in a management level work currently overseas to enable them not to lose the connectivity to the family, to enable them that they still make contributions to the club. And it is, from a business side, one of our biggest challenges to keep talent and to attract talent.
Indeed, indeed. Has the overall revenue or the turnover, has it ever reduced even during COVID?
We have, in a way, successfully digitalized our operations so that we had already 85% of our revenues on digital platforms. When we closed the OCBs, there was a certain impact.
OCB meaning
off-track betting centers. Yeah. There was a certain impact, but when it came then to periods where we could open up the off-track betting centers, we used this to have more people reconnecting with us by opening up accounts, resetting their password. So if you look at the overall turnover, we have a turnover decline in the local horse racing side of around 2%, which is overcompensated by our international commingling, which I think goes now in 13 countries and 60 partners. In the football side, you have a 2% increase. So we roughly will look at a 2% increase our revenue base, even during COVID, which I think shows an remarkable resilience.
It's very amazing results, yes.
And if you see, we are the biggest user of FPS, faster payment system. We have 950,000 people registered with us. So technology is key for our success. And this is why we invest so much in our IT system, that we have systems where we have IP rights to, which only in a way able to handle so many transactions globally than our system.
Well, Winfried, you were in the news last week, and you were basically saying it was mission impossible if Hong Kong is to host the equestrian event for the 2025 National Games. Given the good work that has been achieved, that even during COVID you have no drop of income, the races can continue, why was that?
I think if you go back to the Beijing Olympics, Beijing Olympics were held in Hong Kong 2008 because China has not a health status which enable the transfer of horses internationally. So we created, Hong Kong has a world recognized status, and we transferred this world recognized status into Shunfa, where we have our training center. So therefore the horses go back and forth between Hong Kong and China. But if Chinese horses would come to Hong Kong, they would have to go through a 90 days quarantine in the US. Because if these horses would come to Hong Kong, the health status of Hong Kong would not be any longer recognized internationally. We could have not international races. So that's why, in a way, the national games, where you have from all China horses coming, cannot be held in Hong Kong, because the consequence would be we would lose our international quarantine status. And this is understandably not creating value.
Right. So let's move on to another part of history of Jockey Club. Is I know that recently you have a 50th anniversary of your the apprentice training school, and how many jockeys have we successfully trained and become champion riders?
I think becoming champion riders is definitely something very difficult in a very competitive world. But definitely Tony Cruz was a world-class rider. And if you see with our really systematic training program we have now jockeys like Vincent Ho, Derek Leung, who holds their status among the best riders in the world. But it is a very holistic 7-year program, which you go in with mandatory spending 2 years overseas to hone your skills before you come back to Hong Kong and go into the horse racing side. And we train them as world-class, top-class athletes. And this is why they're in a way competitive, and they have a positive mindset, and they are able to compete with the world's best.
Yeah, I just read that the equestrian sports were awarded TA status by the Hong Kong Sports Institute in 2019. So has it encouraged more youngsters to join as an apprentice rider?
I think one of our challenges is weight.
Weight.
Because I think, in a way, people getting a little bit more heavier. And we have around 400, 500 people who apply. We go to assessment centers where we look at their balance, their reaction time, and their suitability to become jockeys. But we have, for everybody who joins, has a career path. If he doesn't make it to a jockey, he can work in the stables, he can become an assistant trainer, he can be head led, he can go into administration. Right. So what we do is a holistic approach, not only looking at one sportsman, which is probably not easy to be able on the top competing against world-class jockeys.
Yeah, Winfried, just now you mentioned Chongfa in Guangzhou. That was opened in 2018. What was the purpose of having a race course in Guangzhou, which is quite far away from Hong Kong?
I think if you look at our challenge in Hong Kong, we have not enough land. And the Charting Training Center, which was built in 1978, was not designed for an expansion and was not designed for world-class horses. So we could not get more land in Hong Kong. We supported the Asian Games, and we had a unique opportunity to create a training facility which is the world's best. And that enables us to renovate for around 3 billion the stables in Charting to bring them to world-class standard, but it enables further growth, because we can, in a way, look at more races, including races in China. But moreover, it will tie into the national strategy of developing an equine value chain and equine industry. Right. And this will be a wonderful platform to further live to the one country, two system.
Right. Winfried, just one question that comes to my mind. Jockey Club has done the right thing for Hong Kong people. I mean, it allows a responsible wagering. It has a lot of funding for the tax and also helping projects. And with the Greater Bay Area right next door to us, in the next 25 years, how can you see Hong Kong having this great platform to develop into something even bigger? Is it possible with the Greater Bay Area?
I think we can, in a way, make contributions to a wider value chain. At the moment, we have to buy our horses from all over the world, because there is no breeding industry in Hong Kong. And I can see, if you look at 10, 15, 20 years, there will be a breeding industry in China. And these horses can then, and we build a special quarantine station, acquire the health status of Hong Kong. They could participate in Chongfa in Hong Kong. And racing, in the end, is a selection process for breeding. And these horses go back to a breeding industry. So we can create a much bigger value chain, which would be in line with the National Development Plan.
Right. So how does this going to benefit Hong Kong? As you are reading, the equine industry is not only just the horses, trainers and jockeys, are also supporting staff as well. Yeah. And you mentioned horse breeding.
It is definitely a significant de-risking of our current supply chain, long term. And I think it gives development opportunities to Hong Kong people to work in the training center and vice versa. So in the end, we think we have a wider population which we hopefully can interest in the sport. We have a wider population of people we can give exposure to develop. And therefore, it's definitely a win-win.
All right, Winfried, that's all the time we have. And thank you for coming to share with us how horse racing is vital to Hong Kong's stability and prosperity. Have a good week and good night.